Good afternoon, everyone. We are here for a very exciting fireside chat. And the topic today is move from tactical to transformation automation. Wow, there cannot be a better time to talk about this topic. We all know how crazy the COVID time was. We have seen digital transformation projects being expedited with unprecedented speed and scale. Example, a leading retail business, we are just reading a story around it, wanted to extend the curbside delivery business. The planning stretched almost 16 months when they decided to go about it. But in between, COVID lockdown happened. They went live in a month, almost in a month. That's how the crazy stories are there. And this is not one story. And we have a lot of stories which talk about how, in what magnitude the business has evolved in last 3 years. But to make such changes happen, a lot of disintegrated initiatives were taken to serve the need of the business, all in right intentions because that was the need of the hour, like overnight software procurement, overlooking all the standard operating procedures. However, now the dust has settled down, as we all know, and the initiatives taken in response to COVID-19 challenges are somehow today realized to be siloed and tactical because those were the need of the hour. But now it's the time to think from tactical to transformation. Again, I welcome everyone. I'm Utsav Turre, Head of Product Marketing at Newgen, and it's my pleasure to introduce to our esteemed guest speaker to discuss on these automation initiative. I have Leslie Joseph, Principal Analyst from Forrester, and I have Ritesh Verma, Vice President, Products and Solutions at Newgen. So today we'll be going on through questions, and Ritesh and Leslie and I will be discussing it out. Obviously, you have option to put your questions in the chat box, to put your questions, and we'll be taking it at the end of the sessions. So to start with, Leslie, we have gone through these strange 3 years, and these years have seen a lot of changes in terms of consumer preferences, attitudes, in terms of technology priorities in the enterprises, etc., etc. All these changes have given nightmare to CIOs. It's suppose the world of CIOs have changed. In your opinion, what makes a CIO up at night, especially when looking at these modern initiatives?
Thanks, Utsav. What keeps a CIO up at night? That's an interesting question, right? So obviously we've come a very long way since back in early 2020 or late 2019. One of the things that we realized as we went through the cycle and the whole experience, the shared experience of the pandemic, was that, and I guess this was coming for a few years, it's just crystallized a little bit because of everything that we went through, was that digital maturity was not enough. It was no longer enough. Forrester used to talk about digital maturity back in the day and how companies need to invest proactively in making themselves digitally mature. We actually had a whole sort of a digital maturity scoring mechanism to say who were kind of beginners, who were intermediates, and who were advanced. And when the pandemic came and when everything transformed, what we did realize was that there were some companies, even among the digitally mature, that were breaking ahead of the pack and some that weren't. In fact, we did some analysis. We came up with this idea that we're calling future fitness, which is comprised of three qualities that companies and their technology teams need to possess. These three qualities are adaptiveness, creativity, and resilience. Now, adaptiveness is about how quickly and how easily does your technology allow you to reconfigure core business concepts when under the impetus of great change, either in terms of opportunity or in terms of threat. So, for example, the curbside example that you gave is a really good one. Or think about how companies like Uber and Lyft and others had to literally reinvent themselves overnight, right? When a mainstay of their business, which was ride sharing, just dried up overnight. So there was adaptiveness, there's creativity, which is kind of how do you manifest customer obsession in every single aspect of your interfaces. But at the same time, how do you also enable your employees at every level to manifest innovative solutions within their remits. And then the third idea was resilience, which is just how do you effectively manage risk, because the risk horizon is constantly changing. And so we looked at these three ideas, and we actually tried to go back and say, does this matter in terms of the post-pandemic reality and how companies perform against their industry? And so we took a cohort, which was 95% of the companies in that cohort were already digitally mature, right? The pinnacle, the pre-pandemic pinnacle of digital maturity. And we looked at their future fitness levels and connected these up to their performance, their growth rates compared to their industry averages. And what we saw was that even there was a stratification where the companies that were digitally mature but relatively not future fit, the least future fit companies, were actually growing lower than their industry averages, whereas the ones who were the most future fit were growing up to 2.7 times. It's almost 3 times the industry averages. So obviously something had changed very fundamentally in this whole idea of digital maturity. And so the future, no pun intended, was really more about future fitness. And so that's where you strive as a technology team, because a lot of the fundamentals of what you are as a company reside now increasingly in your business strategy. So if you think about this today, where we have ended up is that obviously many businesses that were on the fence about digital or about investments in technology have come to realize that, look, you're either, your technology is a key decider of all of these factors. And so, for example, you could see it manifested in the fact that business is demanding more and more decision making in technology purchases. One of the predictions that we made this year for 2023, in light of all of these shifts, was that up to 40% of API strategy decisions this year will be driven by business, not by IT. So that's a symptom of this change. At the same time, we also know, and I don't want, as much as I don't want to use the word chat GPT, but it is the elephant in the room, right? It's just symptomatic of the fact that emerging tech is always coming at us, and it's ever increasing in its rate of change and its acceleration. So when you step back at this and think about this, what we are seeing is future fitness is driven by three core drivers. There's platforms, practices, and partnerships. And this is fundamental to the CIO's world today, because this was not kind of what digital was or what technology was a few years ago. Back in the day, it was about people, it was about processes, it was about just building tech stacks. Now it's about platforms, which is kind of the shift away from these piecemeal, fit for purpose, but disconnected or monolithic software deployments, and towards a focus on, I would say, a few strategic and interconnected platforms, while at the same time actively managing things like technical debt. Then there's practices, which requires tech teams to be more collaborative, to focus on value streams and agile, to embrace more collaborative forms of decision making with the business, and to evolve for themselves. Think of org structures, right? The old org structures, which were kind of relatively siloed, but now you're talking about org structures that connect operating models to the changes in the business environment. And the third element, the third core driver, is partnerships, which means the a greater and greater leverage of strategic partners within the broader ecosystem, whether they be suppliers or relationships with academia, or all the entire network of participants out there, but in a more flexible sort of way, where the boundaries between kind of where your organization ends or your technology team ends and the business begins, or the partners network begins, are a lot more porous and a lot more facilitative of ongoing innovation. So all these changes are driving the future fit CIO's role to be more central to creating these value networks across the company. So, the CIO is no longer an order taker, but in fact, in some sense, has to balance the role of being the innovator who's always scanning the horizon for new technologies and emerging tech, but at the same time is also the pragmatist who's saying, okay, how does this apply to the business? And so it's a whole new world, it's a whole new cultural transformation more than anything else for the CIO. And a lot of people, a lot of CIOs are still trying to, even get to grips with the fact that this is their new role and this is their new charter.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and it cannot be true than that. I mean, future fitness is what at the example which I took, because they are future ready. They had planned, they have strategies in mind, they are able to implement it, and learning for everyone. Ritesh, what's your thought on? I mean, the interesting concept of platform practices and partnership, which Leslie just introduced. I mean, it gives a broader view in terms of completeness, in terms of digital transformation initiatives.
Right. No, I'm absolutely with Leslie that the role of the CIO himself has changed. So if you look at it, CIO today, uh, probably, how do I put it? It's in a very, very odd kind of a situation that if they don't understand business at an overall level, it will be very, very difficult for them to put or be into such kind of a situation at the moment. So if you look at it, processes, people, systems, and the ecosystem is what will accelerate digital to an overall extent. So today, what's happening is nothing can be done in isolation. What COVID also taught us that things can change in a jiffy. Right? Today
Yeah.
you are working with a fantastic, beautiful portal, and today that might be totally out of bounds for everyone else to be into. Today you're working on a model where the brick and mortar company plays a very, very critical role. To tomorrow it may not exist at all. So if you look at it, the business environment today demands speed, speed of execution, speed of change, speed of doing things. And that's what's most important. So the future fitness, as Leslie talked about, is also about how ready are you for another scenario like COVID to kind of be on your grip and let the business not suffer. So it's also, so if you look at it, pre-COVID, it was all about digital transformation. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was doing something or the other. However,
Mhm.
how much of heart, soul, and bets they had on that thing was probably everyone's guess at the moment. But post COVID, everyone has understood that this is a hard reality. You can't do without it. So, what people have started to look at is automation at an overall level, or probably doing things at an overall level, which affects not just the customer experience, but business operations or business intelligence, or also continuously innovating it. So if you look at it, it's all about front office, mid office, and back office, all coming in together from a business perspective to kind of give you that unified approach of doing things. And that's where a lot of things have started to kind of happen in an integrated way. And the future fitness would all be around how can you make all of this to evolve in the right sense in the minimum possible time for you to react to business. And CIO's role, CDO's role, and probably much more roles would also evolve to kind of take care of such things in the future, I guess.
Yeah. So that's a wonderful thought, and we'll hold on to customer experience, business innovation, and operational excellence. Those are wonderful. But Leslie also talked about three important things, and I would like to you to continue, Ritesh, on that. That how important adaptiveness, creativity, and resilience are important for success of an organization, and how does it all tie together to transformation, for digital transformation?
So if you look at it, Utsav, thank you for kind of putting that across. But if you look at it today, the role of every individual who's sitting into a transformational position is that of a magician. So everything that you're expecting out of him is to do magic and transform it overnight. So timelines are limited. the so if you look at it, all the things that Leslie talked about, the resilience that needs to be there, the creativity is most important. So Chat GPT, as Leslie talked about, is all about uh, that maverick in the room who kind of thought of something weird and was willing to put his bets into it. Or probably in a similar way, the guy who's at the driving position at transformation is putting all his bets into it so that you can be creatively inclined to do something new. So creativity is most important, sustainability of that creation that you build, and the resilience of it to kind of take the load of not just the business part of things, but also the market as such, as to how you are willing to take that risk and take it forward to the next level, is something which will drive the next level of mavericks. in an organization. And I think it's those mavericks that are required in today's business world to make that change, to drive that change, and to be willing to support that change. So
Yeah.
some things would go through, some things would fail, but it doesn't stop today's guys to kind of experiment with.
Yeah, I can see, Leslie, if you have to add something on adaptiveness and resilience.
Yeah, not so much on that, but I want to also kind of introduce a new element here, right? So because we are talking about digital, it's also important to understand that, again, tying all these conversations together, um, we had an S curve that we went through in the
Hmm.
last, I guess, 12 years, where digital went through this kind of, it started slow and then it kind of went parabolic at some point, and then it started to peak out, right? And this was even before the pandemic. It was like 2018, 2019. You started to see that everybody was digital, but everybody was doing the same things. They were delivering the same kind of digital experiences, often built on the similar kind of processes, similar technology stacks. And so there was little room for differentiation with what I call first generation digital, because any
Yeah,
innovation that came into the market was very easily copied. And so there wasn't a lot of, transformation happening towards the end. It was more kind of everybody got to the point where you were investing in digital because the day you stopped investing, you were dead, but then you weren't actually moving the needle forward. So I think what has happened over the last, well, I guess it started before the pandemic, but it's really taking on momentum now, because really the technologies and the kind of the technology pairings are coming into their own now. Is that what we're seeing is there's a new S curve that is starting up that has just probably, has taken off and is probably going to go parabolic anytime now. And this S curve is essentially the second wave of digital technologies, which are all about automation and AI and, whatever you're seeing from the perspective of chat GPT or low code and all these things. They're just all part of this whole new wave. The end game, I think, is and we've documented this in Forrester, right? We call it the autonomous enterprise, which is kind of this almost like a self-driving car version of a company, which is kind of an enterprise that is completely run by automation and autonomous technologies, where the processes and the customer interfaces and everything are self-healing, self, learning, capable of all the things that we talked about: adaptiveness, creativity, and resilience, where people and machines work collaboratively to achieve and drive outcomes. And I don't mean this in a mechanistic sort of way, but I mean it in kind of, even, humans doing what humans are really good at, machines doing what machines are really good at, and coming together really effectively to create that, 1 + 1 is greater than 2 kind of synergy. So I think that's important to understand, because when you talk about transformation and when you talk about digital, it's important to understand that these technologies represent sort of that step function, that new S curve. And that's really where we are headed over the next, this is a cycle that is at least 5 to 8, if not 10 years long, and we're starting now. So it's important to keep that in perspective when we have these conversations.
Wonderful. We talked about a lot of, and you talked about a lot of technologies, but I think that the core platforms which are in an organization, which play an important role. Uh, in your opinion, Leslie, how this modern platform strategy, and if you're a platform, you have to have a strategy around it. How this modern platform to drive future fitness, to drive adaptiveness, creativity, resilience, all things which we talked about are different from the earlier technology platforms, if we see.
Well, so I think it's so software has changed quite radically, even over the course of the last
mm,
5 years. The software
Mhm.
platforms that we're looking at today, if you're out in the market to buy, say, an ERP system or a CRM platform or whatever, are radically different from what they were 5 years ago. In fact, it's worth reflecting on the fact that ERP as a term, for example, is 30 years old.
Mhm.
It actually stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, for anybody who's keeping count, which makes no sense in today's dynamic world, right? In fact, at Forrester, we've stopped even we kind of have started distancing ourselves from the ERP, the acronym. In fact, we prefer to use, for example, digital operating platforms to describe the new, ERP systems or digital experience platforms to describe the new customer relationship management systems and so on. And so I think terminology is one part of it. But the core idea is that if you think about what software used to be, it was characterized by a lot of rigidity, a lot of the need to customize hard into the core of the platform, and there was obviously a lot of vendor lock-in. And so what I said earlier about kind of where we ended up with software was that our software, the digital sameness that I spoke about, was that the software was dictating how our processes ran rather than the business needs. And so that led to a loss of enterprise resilience. It led to a loss of adaptiveness. And obviously you were stuck in that model. So there was little creativity to be wrung out of this. So I think what's happened now over the last few years is that the software itself has changed. So today, when we talk about platforms, what we're really saying is technology leaders and CIOs and strategists must really prioritize and govern a relatively limited set of platforms with scale, innovation, and ecosystems that focus on and drive the manifestation of business impact. So what does that mean is that today's platforms are, so you focus on fewer platforms. Don't just go and build something because you need a custom functionality built in one particular silo of your organization, but build connections. So broad mix of functionality, large ecosystems. So think about industry solutions, extensibility through marketplaces. Your services partners, your consultancies and SI partners are also coming up with kind of add-ons and capabilities that plug into these platforms. So that's great. There are integration tools, there are data add-ons. So there's a whole ecosystem around some of these newer software technologies and platforms. Most importantly, they are modular and composable. It's no longer so much about build versus buy. It's about customize versus compose versus configure. And a great example of this in abstraction is this idea that we've come up with, which we call the automation fabric. So if you have bought my thesis, you're convinced by my thesis that automation is important. How do you construct automation to envelop your business model, your operating model, right? You can't just do it because there is an automation tool available out there or a platform or an ERP system or whatever you want to call it that you just bring in and snap in. That doesn't happen. That's fiction at this point. But what you can do and what you should do is you should be thinking about how do I assemble all these different components and build some parts custom, as in composed and configured, some parts from our external partners, some parts from cloud platforms. How do I put all these together in harmony to create this fabric across my organization that enables end-to-end automation with easy flow of data across your systems, across your workflows, across your processes, across your workforce. So that's really the essence of this modern idea of platforms.
Yeah, that makes complete sense because you also talked about it. Large enterprises have a lot of technologies and everyone need to talk to each other. And when we look at complete automation, all these orchestrations becomes very important. With that, Ritesh, I mean, what's your opinion on orchestrating these business apps across the enterprises to meet that automation goal of future fitness?
Right. So Leslie talked about the automation fabric as such, and that actually, if you look at it, has to have automation done at scale across organizations. So if you look at it, what's most critical is to kind of define where you want to be with this transformational exercise. What kind of automation do you actually want to drive through, and how would it be achieved? For doing so, at an organization level transformation, if you're looking at, you need to really look at probably doing things at scale, deciding on what you can do internally, dividing work. So it's all about kind of division of labor, division of work, so that the right people can do the right job. If you can kind of give business the flexibility to define what they expect out of the whole thing, it will be a plus plus. If you kind of define on the ecosystem that's already available, the infrastructure investments that you've already done, how you can utilize those integrated using IT, it'll make a lot of difference. Finally, the ecosystem. If it's already available, why not subscribe to it instead of building it up, right? So all those methodologies would come in together to divide or probably devise a perfect strategy to attain speed, a speed to kind of deploy, involve analytics and AI to kind of learn from that deployment, and then redeploy in order to kind of make things better and change at speed. So none of the traditional things that were prevalent till around 4 5 years back are now kind of relevant at all. So if you look at it, programming or kind of building it for myself or large IT teams within the organizations doesn't make sense. It's in the power of giving things to the right stakeholders so that they can build it up themselves and then go about combining them together to kind of build an orchestrated organization at an overall level and further leading to transformation. So automation, traditionally how we know it, is going to kind of change. It will be much more evolved in an overall level, and that will drive the businesses to be much more kind of, in a way, more responsive to the market conditions as compared to where they are today.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thought. I mean, business being more involved with IT and IT working more with business to achieve that goal of rapid digitization. With that, we have something for our audience, and we have a poll coming your way. Uh, uh, Listeners, you'll have almost 10 seconds to respond to that. And yeah, uh, the question is, how are you looking at implementing low-code platform in your organization? And you have to select one of the options: not planned, planning in coming year, implementing, or already have implemented. Oh, we have the results also, and we can see a lot of them, almost 43% of people who are here are implementing. People who have not planned, I think after this fireside chat, you will see a change in an opinion. Have already implemented, there's an option to reinvent and reconsider, especially when we are looking at future fitness. All who are planning are right on top there. Thank you. Then, Leslie, I'd like to continue with you over there, since this question was on low code. And when we speak of low code, we also talk about citizen development. They seem to be two related but different ideas, in my opinion. Is that true? Is low code different from citizen development, or is it a subset, or is it something else? Can we help our listeners today to understand this space altogether?
Sure. So low-code software, incidentally, I think if I'm not mistaken, Forrester coined the term many years ago, and it's gone from a category of software on its own to now, I guess you can call it a feature that is a part of all kinds of software out there that allow for different personas to come and build, including pro devs. Um, I actually wanted to point out a few interesting things, right, about how low code is not just impacting citizen development, which is one part of kind of when we say citizen development, we are really referring to business users with probably no formal training, if any, even informal training in actually working in an IDE the way a software developer builds software. So that's kind of one part of it. But then there's also this other part, which is pro devs, right? Professional developers who traditionally would have worked within the context of an IDE, who know Python or Java or whatever. How they engage with low code tools is also kind of increasing, and an interesting way to slice this. So we do a developer survey every year. The most recent one that we looked at, we saw that there was this whole group of people who were pro coders, professional coders, right? Who came from kind of the discipline of software engineering. But then they were using low code. They were using low code or no code or DPA tools and so on. And this cohort was as much as 30% of pro coders were also what we are calling pro low coders, right? Professional low coders.
Yes.
Um, but it gets really interesting from that point on, because when we looked at the numbers, what we saw in terms of the demographic differences between the, let's just call them high coders and low coders, right? The high coders are the people who just work in IDs, the more traditional software developer folks who don't use low code tools to augment their software development skills, versus the second group, which is pro low coders, which is kind of professional developers, but these are the people who are not averse to using some of these low code tools to build software. The demographics are strikingly different. So first of all, the pro low coders are less experienced overall in software development than the high coders. So the average experience is about 8.3 years versus 12.6 years for the high coders. So these are not rookies, but there is a difference in kind of experience levels. There's also a difference in age. So the pro low coders are about 38 years old, whereas the high coders are about 42 years old. The pro low coders, 79% of these pro low coders are managers. They're also 1.5 times as likely compared to high coders to be in domains like, to be called full stack developers. Interestingly, 41% of low coders as compared to 27% of high coders are more likely to perform functions like, being a data scientist or being a product manager. So they wear multiple hats. The most interesting thing for me, in this whole raft of statistics that I'm giving you, was the fact that the pro low coders happen to be more business focused. So an astonishing 36% of individual contributor high coders did not know what their firm's annual revenue was, compared to just 11% of low coders who were not aware of what their firm's revenue was. So you see the big difference, right? Is that there's a whole cohort of people who are starting to use low code, not because there is a gap in terms of their capability or skill, but there is a whole demographic shift in the skill set that we are seeing from a whole new generation of coders that are coming into software development. We also have noticed that there is a bigger likelihood that pro low coders would use modern development techniques, value stream management. Their organizations in general are usually ahead in the adoption of cloud native containers, microservices, things like that. So you see that there's a whole new generation, as I said. And then citizen development, which is the more traditional kind of way that we define it, is just business people, getting up and wanting to be involved in developing software using low code interfaces, low code work, builders, and so on. That is coming up as kind of I won't say a subset, but kind of as an adjunct to this. And that's increasing as we go forward, just because of the fact that software wants to democratize, and there is this great demand supply mismatch in terms of the amount of software needed versus the number of, I guess, hands and brains, you could say, available to create the software. But then that opens up a whole new set of considerations, because a lot of the times, while the tools are getting better, the fact is that it also requires a new approach from a governance perspective, from a skills management perspective, to enable this group. So these two are, low code and citizen development, overlap in certain important places, but they are distinct as well.
Yeah, I
Nitish,
mean,
you just speak
yeah,
what your thoughts are.
yeah, Ritesh, go ahead.
Now, I totally agree with Leslie, because low code today is very, very trivialized. If you look at it, it resonates with saying that, look, if you have something simple to build like a portal or simple applications to be done, you must use low code technologies or something like that. However, if you look at it, I believe that low code is a way of life. You need to kind of have it imbibed into the fabric of your organization itself if you have to kind of succeed with it. So any automation that you do, as Leslie said, it has to be composed. Various components come in together, be orchestrated together in order to kind of drive that enterprise level scaled automation, as I was talking about earlier, to give you the right benefits. So, and it cannot be done without low code. So, if you look at it, I believe in two things. One is that low code actually is an approach, is a philosophy that kind of transcends the entire transformation exercise that you want to undertake into an organization as such, primarily related to automation. One. Second is that low code is the way to go. If you look at the natural evolution of also developing software as such, developing applications as such, from the days of assembly level programming to probably Fortran, Pascal, Basic, and then Java, React, Python, and all those things today. If you look at the trend, it's slowly moving towards less of coding and more of engineering and composing things together in order to make that transformation to happen for you. So if you have to drive speed, if you need to drive agility, resilience, and optimized delivery of things, you need to you can't do without low code. As I said, business goes change in a jiffy, and that can only be done once you're following a low code approach. And the platform that you choose, irrespective of whatever it is, uh, must must be as comprehensive as possible. You need to take care of communications, documents, conversations, things like that, in order to give that holistic feel to the overall thing.
Yeah. So Leslie, any change? I mean, we talked about embracing low code, no code. Any change in attitude of decision makers or the buyers for embedding low code, no code, and citizen development in their within the modern platform approach? If we see.
So, great question. Let's go back to where we started, right? When we were talking about CIOs and kind of their world. I think in my conversations with CIOs and tech leaders, there are two kinds. There are two cohorts. The first doesn't want to talk about it because it kind of this is a whole new way of delivering technology, which in some sense runs a little orthogonal to the core instinct of a lot of these leaders that they've seen and grown up with over the last, throughout their professional careers over the last 20, 30 years. All of a sudden devolving control and focusing on kind of greater collaboration with the business where it's a new instinct. So there's too much of change, and so kind of managing and navigating through that change requires a lot of personal and professional commitment and dedication. So there's that cohort, and there's the other cohort, which is kind of the more progressive CIOs, typically people who are change agents, who understand that the new dynamic requires from them a different way of working, different models for collaborating with their stakeholders. And they are exploring, they're trying to understand that, if 5, 10, 15% of all software development moves towards the business and is delivered by just regular people in the lines of business, in the functions, then what does that mean for the IT operating model? What does that mean for governance? What does that mean even for something as simple as the kind of skill mix that you need within the IT organization to support that kind of change? So it's not an easy transition, but it's something that increasingly more and more people are at least interested in exploring and piloting and trying out, so that they can understand where the limits are and how much support their organization can deliver, and where those kind of that equilibrium lies.
Yeah. Again, with on that thought, since we are talking about citizen developer, we have one more poll for our audience, and let's see what do they say. Can we go with the poll? Okay. Uh, so, do you think your organization will benefit if citizen developers use low-code platform to develop enterprise applications? Yes, no, can't say. Let's hear out what our audiences have to say on this.
I guess everybody will agree, right? There you go.
There you go. Yes. With that, almost we are on the last question, and this question is for Ritesh. Uh, we talked about a lot of technologies. We talk about rapid application development. We talk about inclusive development. We talk about business, IT, citizen developer, pro developers, all these working together. But what kind of governance model and approaches are are actually helpful to attain this scale of automation when we talk about these modern platforms?
And that's a great question, Utsav. We've been talking about the tools, but ultimately, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So it's all about how do you kind of handle the tool correctly, build in governance models, or probably build in a structure to kind of take on these transformations via automation. In order to do so, we strictly believe that there has to be a governance body to the whole thing, which comprises of business, IT, the infrastructure, the system integrator, and maybe the consultants like Leslie to kind of steer the automation or the transformation to the right direction, as has been kind of worked around with. Have regular goalposts to it as to what you want to achieve, where and decide what your level of automation currently is, what kind of systems are already there, and engineer your solutions out. So it's like building a multi-story skyscraper where you need to decide as to how many floors it will have, where and when would the plumbing happen, when would the electric wiring be done, and probably when the roof needs to be laid out. So decide on and be adaptable to change on the fly wherever a course correction is needed. So probably if you look at the overall landscape of automation at an enterprise level, if you look at it, this so-called center of excellence really plays an important role to kind of give it direction, give it that nudge in order to kind of build it to things, and should be empowered to kind of, if in lack of a better word, kick the people when they're not kind of behaving as per the schedule. So it's this governance which will actually make that difference in order to kind of put the transformation job onto the right point.
That's wonderful, Draw. I mean, if you also want to put it together, I mean, you can have the best of engine and the car, but if you have to have a good driver also to drive that and to take it in the right direction. Yeah, Leslie, your thought on that?
Yeah, no disagreement here. I think the governance models they evolve with the organizational maturity, but there are a few tenets that support this journey, right? In the sense that long term, the chosen governance model at the end is always typically a federated one, but then it must balance things like autonomy with control. It must balance sort of the shift in technology, the IT, the role of IT against things like the transformation of organizational culture and risk tolerance and so on. And then it must also focus on teach a man to fish versus feed him fish, right? So like providing not just training but true mentorship. And so kind of that has to evolve away from, hey, we've just established a few guardrails and now you're on your own, to how do you kind of really build that into the culture of the organization, so that people aren't just being taught a tool, but taught to solve their problems in very real ways, and to come out of kind of a citizen development training program knowing what it means to build, in some sense, to build software. So what does an SDLC look like? How do you how do you test your hypothesis? How do you your software, your the stuff that you've built, how do you how do you do business cases for to assess your own use cases that you've come up with? Things like that need to be part of the organizational DNA, and that is the job of a strong federated COE that comes together with true collaboration between business and IT. That's honestly, it's an evolution. So companies start with kind of these autonomous teams that are going and building stuff in a dark corner. But then from there, you got to consistently have the organizational motivation to keep evolving this to a point where, look, 10 years from now, development is going to be just like, like Excel today. Everybody will know it to some extent or the other. But getting there requires focus, dedication, and organizational support.
Wonderful. I think that's a great thought, and we discussed almost all the aspects when we talk about automation, and we have some questions which we have from audiences, and let me just quickly look at that. And yeah, the question is, for organizations trying to achieve automation at scale, what are some tips you have for anyone trying to navigate the automation maze? We covered it in detail. I mean, yeah, Leslie, Ritesh, any one of you.
Ritesh, go ahead.
No, I think we discussed it in detail over there. Automation at scale is not just about the tool, as we said, it's about putting the discipline into place, a federated COE, as Leslie mentioned, to kind of put it all together, give it that nudge, and take it at the right direction for steering it through the actual transformation that you actually want to happen out of it. An important point that Leslie made was that it's very important to keep the various teams involved. It's not just about a man with the stick coming in and kind of directing it through. After all, it's not the German Shepherd kind of putting the sheep in together. It's about the sheep also to know what they want to kind of drive out of the whole automation or the transformation process. So driving it at an overall level from that perspective, actually having everyone involved or part of the stakeholding committee would actually make that difference to have.
Wonderful. We have one more question, and it says that thanks for talking about automation at scale. We have a low-code platform, and we also thought that it's all around centered around citizen development. You're not able to bear fruits. How should enterprise use like us to use low-code platform to its maximum potential where we can scale?
I think Leslie is the consultant here. He can help with that.
No, I think we've seen several situations like this. I speak to companies that are at various stages of citizen development scaling, and this comes up a lot, right? And this goes back to what I just said, and I think Ritesh, you also spoke about it over the last few minutes. This whole idea of kind of really providing the right kind of mentorship. So some of the companies that I advise have actually moved away from, for example, they've instituted training programs at various points in their evolution. So there's people coming in, getting trained, walking out of the other end of the low code training program, and then not going ahead and creating anything, just not building any apps. And so what companies have, some of the companies that I've seen through this evolution have ended up doing is actually reforming their entire approach to make sure that not only do they kind of rejig some elements of the training program itself so that people are more focused on, what did you build at the end of it, but they're also aligning IT people with these people who go through the program, so that when they come out, there are regular check-ins to say, hey, are you actually building something now? How have you progressed along the original idea that you came into the program with? Do you actually come out of this whole system with a working app, and then what do you do with that? And as I said before, it's also about kind of teaching them the basics of how do you think about an SDLC, how do you test your applications, how do you kind of build a business case, how do you look at your processes and your work. In fact, one of the things that is also become very interesting is that it's not just about citizen development in the conventional sense. Now we are talking about so many different personas. We're talking about citizen data scientists. We're talking about citizen process experts. You don't necessarily always have to build an app or build a workflow, but you can contribute to the process of building an application by working with technology closely and bringing your domain and business expertise as an SME to the process of building the app. So there are a lot of diverse options, but the important thing is it all centers around skill and skill building. Teach a man to fish.
Yeah.
Don't just hand them a fish and expect that they will do it repeatably and and consistently, right?
Yeah, because that's important, because I also heard a lot of stories where this tool has been given and people have created hundreds of applications, and once people leave, those applications are not finding any place anymore, and no one knows what to do with. So yeah, that's where governance and center of excellence teams was actually driving all these initiatives together. Makes a lot of sense. This for audience, so we have some more time. If you have any questions to post uh, in this, we'll wait for a minute or so, and then we'll close for today's session. Uh, So one more thing, Ritesh, we talked about initially. I mean, we briefly touched upon while we have questions coming. Let's discuss on the concept of customer experience, operational excellence, and business innovation. These are three important things, and 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 they are tied together. How do you see one moving from one to another to third, and how that forms a circle over there?
So actually, if you look at it, all of these three must be considered while undergoing the transformation exercise uh, in order to make that difference to happen. So if you look at it, as we were talking about pre-COVID, when half-hearted digital transformations were happening, and Leslie talked about uh, the the automation and the entire thing all together. So if you look at it, or the future readiness that we were talking about, the evolved companies really address all of these three together. So we have multiple examples where, for example, the PPP program, people were, the US government offered the the loan to be there to pay their
Yeah.
employees, but it was all digital. Obviously, you could not walk up to a brick and mortar kind of a thing into a COVID era, and every bank was left high and dry. So it's all about how can you go about addressing it in unison so that you're able to continuously evolve and make that difference. So customer experience is all about do it yourself, DIY, where customers can actually work on the systems. And when I say customers, it's all about customers, employees, vendors, and whoever is the touch point for the organization as such. Um, the operational excellence is what drives the bottom line. And finally, if you look at it, business innovation would draw information from the customer experience, the operational excellence, draw out where the rejects are happening or where the abandonment of the process is happening, where the bottlenecks are, derive knowledge from it, and probably rework on things so that these can be continuously changed and made better. So, any successful digital transformation exercise today is about looking at all the three together rather than in isolation.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thought. And yeah, I mean, if we talked about future fitness, and if your business is not, if your business model is not innovative, and you don't have the technology, modern technology platform to drive through this automation maze, you won't be able to do it. But I'd like to congratulate all our audience who are here, who have survived this maze. Whatever you did at that point of time, that was the need of the hour. But right now, it's time to think from tactical to transformation. Do talk to Newgen for your digital transformation initiatives, and see how can we help you in this riding this wave. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Ritesh, for this wonderful discussion. I hope everyone got something out of it. We got some answers right away, which we're thinking of from our customers. And all the best, and have a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, thanks, Leslie. Bye.
Thanks, Ritesh. Thanks, Utsav.